Hello everyone, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink, and I have two cards for you guys today using the new Simon Says Stamp Cuddly Critters stamp set that was just released. Was it last week? A week and a half ago? I don't even remember what day it is. Anyway, I did this little technique that I've shown on several videos, and I've done a quick tip video on it, is using the coordinating dies to lay out the stamped images so that I don't have to cut the dies apart, and so I can stamp all the images at once. So with this particular die set, it works perfectly because they come like this, nothing's nested or anything. So I just laid the dies out face down on top of my cardstock, which was actually watercolor paper, and then lined up all the stamps using my Mini Misty here. And then another good thing about using the Mini Misty is most often I need to stamp more than once because I'm stamping onto watercolor paper, so it's got that bit of texture. Plus these are brand new stamps, so sometimes they do take a little bit of conditioning. So I used my Simon Says Stamp Intense Black ink and stamped all the images at once onto, this is Strathmore Ready Cut watercolor paper, the 140-pound cold press paper. So once they were all stamped, I'm going to use my Sakura Koi watercolors, which this actually isn't the first time I used them. This is officially, I guess, the first time in a video because I had filmed a video using these not too long ago, like a few days ago, and the footage was completely out of focus, so that was fabulous. So I ended up just sharing the card and obviously not the video because I didn't have time to refilm. So I wanted to use them again. This is just a fun set. I've already done a separate review of just these watercolors, so I think they're great for little card makers and stuff. So I just went along and would pick up the colors, and I was mixing them on a little palette that is included with the watercolors, and I'm using a silver size 2 water brush, or no, size 4. I used my size 4 brush. A water brush, like the water brush that it comes with or anything, would work great too because, you know, not doing anything fancy. The nice thing though with using a brush like this, like the nicer silver brushes or just a good quality brush, is the body of the brush holds a lot of color. So you can see I'm not dipping back into my color very frequently because the brush itself just holds so much. So you can color like an entire image with just what's in the brush. So I've super sped up the watercoloring portion of this video. Otherwise we'd be here forever. I didn't spend a ton of time coloring these. I'm not even sure. I don't really time myself. I do get asked that a lot. How much time did it take to make a card? How much time did it take to color? I don't often time myself because especially lately, because I do make my cards in usually multiple sittings. I'll get 20 minutes here, a few minutes here, late at night, whatever, because I work around my kids. So, and same thing with these guys. I did most of the watercoloring in one sitting and then, had to run and pick up kids, whatever, that sort of thing. I think it only took maybe half an hour, maybe. I'm not even sure. But I didn't do anything super fancy with all of them. I just laid down basically just kind of a base color first. And then I went back in and just watered down those same colors. So it was just a lighter wash and used that for all their little tummies. And for the panda, I just did a little really light gray area, just give them a little bit of shading just so there's something there, even though really that's a nice thing. That's why I like pandas and snowmen and penguin images. I think that's why I like them so much, is because they're so easy. You don't really have to do a whole lot with them. So anyway, so I did that, and then when everything was dry, I went in with a second layer and just kind of went in a little bit darker and then kind of blended it out a bit. Honestly, again, I wasn't doing anything super groundbreaking or, doing any really fancy color layering. My goal most of the time with stamp images is just to get the color down. And images like this, they're so cute. They kind of just lend themselves to, you don't have to be super fancy. I know some people do phenomenal coloring and they make the images just pop and come to life and that. And I love it. I love seeing that. I still have a hard time myself achieving that look. So for me, I consider it a win if I get a card done and get a video that's, editable and posted. So all these little guys, I just went and worked on one at a time, adding in all the color. That's a nice thing too about being able to just stamp everything first and having them all on one sheet like this. I can do all these images at one time and I'm not fiddling around. And I also feel like I'm kind of accomplishing more by doing several images at once. So I went back in and added a little more depth to all the little tummy areas of all these little critters. And while I did think about doing, stripes and little definition, especially on that cat, I was like, oh, he would look so cute with little stripes on him. Again, I just wanted to get the color down. Maybe one of these days when I get some more time, I can be a little more creative when coloring in animals and that. I think they would be a lot more fun. I love seeing what other people do, to make them look like their own animals or who they're sending it to, their pet, whatever. But yeah, as always, my goal is to just get the images colored in. So once I was done with all the main colors of the animals, I mixed up a little bit of one of the pinks in the palette and just used that for their little cheeks. So I would apply the color and then I would clean off my brush and just blend it out with a clean, wet brush because I didn't want it to be super saturated. So I thought that was just a really little cute addition. And then I just used that same pink. I just deepened it a little bit and used that to fill in all the centers of the ears and their little feet, just to give it that extra little fun bit of color. So once I had everything watercolored in and filled in, I had let it sit to dry. It didn't take very long. Pretty sure I'd let it sit to dry while I went off and did other things or picked up my kids, etc., etc. But once they were completely dry, I grabbed the coordinating die set and lined it back up over top of all these stamped images. And then I like to use micropore tape, but again, it doesn't have to be micropore tape. You can just use regular tape, just something to hold it in place because that's always the worst. And even with the micropore tape, I wasn't paying enough attention when I lined these up, so I didn't die cut them perfectly, but I went with it because after all the time and effort put into them. So I taped them into place, ran it through my machine, and so then they're all die cut in one pass. And then once I was done with that, I actually die cut some more watercolor cardstock. This is the Pretty Pink Posh stitched photo frame dies. And I used the largest die from the set and die cut 4 frames from watercolor cardstock. And then I pulled out my watercolors again just to color in the kind of background, like the spot in the center that gets cut out. I decided to use that, to keep that and use that as my background. So in my head, by this point, I was starting to kind of think, what images am I going to use? I wasn't sure at that moment exactly how many cards I was going to make, but then I decided to settle on 2 cards, and just based on the sentiments I'm going to use. So I was like, I'm going to make a birthday card and a baby card, and I decided to go with the blue and green for the birthday card, and the baby card I decided to do in a kind of girl theme. So I did the one background pink, and the other background I used that kind of peachy color in the palette. And then after that, since I started thinking up the actual cards, I stamped images from, this is the Cuddly Critters accessories set. So there's tons of stamps in this set. So I just stamped the balloon, the banner, and the little birthday hat onto a scrap of the watercolor paper. And same thing, watercolored it in with those watercolors. And then once everything was dry, there's a coordinating die set for this stamp set as well. And same thing, tons of dies in this set because they've got dies for all the little tiny images too. So this one I'd cut apart because there's a bunch of little images nested inside the larger ones. So I cut those apart and lined those up again onto the stamped and watercolored little images, and then die cut all of those, and then started to assemble all these pieces I have. So I lined up all my little characters within their photo frames how I wanted them, and then I just flipped it over to the backside and I just taped them in place with Scotch tape. You could, use Tombow Monomulti, whatever adhesive, but I was just using tape. It just was more convenient. So kind of was figuring out how I'm going to do my layouts and where I'm going to put all these little guys. And then the backgrounds, I did the same thing. I just lined them up behind the little images. And this is where the tape is perfect because you don't have much overlapping areas. So I just used tape to tape them all down. And same thing, just kind of mentally figuring out where I'm going to place these on my cards so that they look right. So getting everything figured out, flipped over, taped down, this is just kind of fussy work at this point, so which I enjoy. So I got that all somewhat figured out, and then decided after the fact where I was going to place my sentiments, because I was originally planning on stamping them on the card itself, and then I was like, no, I want to stamp them on the frame, which poses a little bit of a problem because there's all this dimension and kind of bumpiness underneath where I want to stamp the sentiment because I have all that tape and the stamped image. So I used my Misty to do that. And on the first one it didn't stamp perfectly. So that's, saved me there. So I was able to ink up the sentiment a second time and stamp it again so that I had a perfect stamp sentiment. And the sentiments are from that same Cuddly Critters Accessories stamp set. So I did that with the first little image, and then the second image I grabbed the happy birthday sentiment, and same thing, inked that up with the intense black ink. This is from Simon Says Stamp. That's what I used in the beginning to watercolor with. And this one stamped almost perfectly, but it was nice to just be able to stamp it a second time and intensify it. So once I had all those done, I'm just going to adhere these straight onto my card base, which is smooth white cardstock that is cut to 4 1/4 by 11 and scored at 5 1/2, so an A2 size card. And I use my Tombow Mono Multi to adhere these straight onto the card base. And then added some adhesive to the balloon here and adhered that into place. And then I did the same thing with the second card, just adhered the two little characters and then added adhesive and adhered the banner. And as always, I couldn't stop there and had to add a bunch of sequins. So I pulled out a whole bunch of pretty pink posh sequins from my stash. And for the baby card, I chose shades of pink. And really just kind of went nuts. I'm really just going overboard now with the sequins. I just think they're so fun. So I just kind of sprinkled them onto the card and kind of liked how that looked. So then adhered them into place with my Ranger Multimedia Matte Adhesive. So just squeeze little tiny dots and then press the sequin down into it and it's good to go. So I did that with the first card, and then the second card I went with blues and greens, and same thing, kind of sprinkled them on the card and then adhered them into place. And then I still had 2 of those little images left over from creating and watercoloring them all. I could have made a third card if I wanted, but you guys know I love to finish the insides of my cards. So I saved the 2 remaining little characters and used them on the inside of the card. So for the birthday card, I stamped the image, added the balloon, and then there's a little For You stamp in that same Cuddly Critters accessory set. So I stamped that on the inside. And then the baby card, I just added that little koala, and there's a sending love sentiment in that same stamp set. So I stamped that and then adhered the little koala, and that finished off the card. So I will have a link below the video in the description box. There'll be a link to my blog post. There'll be the pictures posted on there, as well as links to all the supplies used. So if any of that interests you, just check out the description box below the video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for subscribing, for thumbs upping, for all the comments. I always try to respond as I see them. I do read all the comments on my videos, and I really, really appreciate it. So thank you all so much, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye.